hockey.
World Cup comes every 4 years and we are getting into the 12th edition of the Cup, with it all set to start on the 30th of May. How has the World Cup been over the last 11 editions? Cricket began in England, but the masters of the game have never won the Cricket World Cup. But who has been the champion for the maximum number of times? How many times have the Asian teams fared well? And what are the fortunes of the Asian teams this time around? And what are the things that we've learned from the World Cups gone by? We'll try and get answers to some of these questions with our studio expert this evening joining us, Rakesh Rao, senior journalist joining us this evening. Rakesh, good evening. Welcome to the show.
Very good evening. Thank you so much.
Well, the last three World Cups, if you see, let's begin. We've divided this particular World Cup program of the history of the 11 editions gone by into, three parts. The first part is from 75 to 1983. Why this three? Because it's a very significant part of this three. This is the first three World Cups where the World Cups were held in England. That's not all. There was absolute dominance there by the mighty West Indies until India changed it to win the first World Cup in 1983. It changed cricket in India, and the rest is history.
Come 30th May 2019, cricket fans around the world will be glued to their televisions as the highly anticipated 12th ICC Cricket World Cup starts. The first match is between South Africa and host country England, setting the scene for an exciting competition. We take a look at some of the exhilarating moments right from the 1975 Cricket World Cup. World Cup 1975, host England, champions Windies, runners-up Australia. The first World Cup final, played at Lord's between Australia and West Indies, enthralled the audience. Clive Lloyd, batting with heartwarming fluency, helped the Windies recover from a precarious position to reach 291. Viv Richards then showcased brilliant fielding to help them beat Australia by 17 runs. In virtual darkness at 9 o'clock, Lloyd and his teammates lifted the coveted World Cup trophy, and it turned out to be an epochal night for them. World Cup 1979. Host England, champions Windies, runners-up England. The 1979 World Cup followed a pattern of 60 overs per side and was played in white clothing and with red balls. Mercilessly beating England to a pulp, Viv Richards propelled West Indies to 286 with his undefeated 138. He pulled, cut and drove with panache to leave England bowlers gasping for breath. Mike Beerley and Jeff Boycott brought up a 129-run opening partnership to give England some hope. However, all that evaporated once Joel Garner came into his own. The towering quick, who found himself twice on a hat-trick, boasted figures of 10 overs, 38 runs and 5 wickets. West Indies crushed England by 92 runs. Clive Lloyd's merry men made history again. World Cup 1983, host England, champions India, runners-up Windies. England were declared as hosts of the World Cup for the third successive time. Having won the previous two editions, West Indies entered the competition as clear favourites. It was the first time that Zimbabwe, winners of the 1982 ICC trophy, made an appearance in the tournament, which was played across 15 different venues. The defending champions hardly had to sweat on 22nd June 1983 as Malcolm Marshall and Andy Roberts shared 5 wickets between them to bowl out Pakistan for a paltry 184, before Vivian Richards' 80 took West Indies to their third straight final. Despite posting a low total on the board, Kapil Dev's men put up a spirited show with the ball to bamboozle the title favourites in front of a capacity crowd at Lord's. Mohinder Amarnath starred, both with the bat and the ball, picking up 3 vital wickets after making a gutsy 80 ball 26 to help India get their hands on a World Cup trophy for the first time.
Well, the big lesson that one can pick from that 1983 triumph, as Kapil said, if the brain gives you many options, it's for the heart to decide. Listen to what your heart tells you, and maybe it could be history. Well, Rakesh in the studios with us. Rakesh, purely looking at 75, 79, 83. Before 75, 79, we didn't win a World Cup game. But coming into 83, we were a different team. Nobody considered us, even gave us an outside chance of winning the World Cup. Did it change cricket in India, that particular triumph?
Absolutely it did. I mean, the state of affairs which you see right now.
True.
We owe it to that 1983, that triumph, 25th of, June 1983.
True.
What happened was unbelievable, unexpected, and that changed the course of cricket worldwide, because India became forced. The Indian administrators started believing, and that was the result which we'll definitely talk about and what happened in '87, because it was India which took the World Cup away from England. And yes, it did make a huge difference, and I think we are, wherever we are, we owe it to that historic night, that historic triumph.
What was different about that particular squad? Led by Kapil, was it the team of all-rounders that clicked for Team India? Or would you say it was a big mixed bunch of motley cricketers who had a firm belief that they could do it?
See, Anil, for me, I mean, I remember watching practically every game that was actually shown on, like, it was the first time that DD showed us live action.
True.
And I remember I was in school. And the coverage was also not so much, I mean, because there was no hype. And that was the time when we went there. I mean, there is a bit of history to it, because we went to West Indies first. And West Indies, we lost the series badly, but we beat West Indies once.
True.
Then we come to the World Cup and we play West Indies in the league, and we beat them again. Now that self-belief was enormous, that we suddenly realized that, okay, we could beat the defending champions.
True.
So we beat them in England. And that was a 60-over affair. Now, 60-over affair, all these three editions, right, from 75, 79, and 83, they were held over 60 overs because of the one simple reason was that light was available, that you could actually have 120 overs a day. But, of course, in every subsequent edition after that, because we came to India, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, whatever, and that, I mean, India and Pakistan in '87, we didn't have enough light, so it was reduced to 50. Now, if you just go back to that 1983 World Cup squad, as you asked, now you can have so many reasons, but I remember when the World Cup was on, nobody gave us a chance. Even when we played against Australia, I remember Roger Binney getting David Hooks out, and we were still listening to commentary because DD wasn't ready with the equipment to show it to us. But just before that, I think it all started, the matter of self-belief. We'll have to go back to that one match against Zimbabwe, 17 for 5, and we were almost nowhere in that game because we couldn't believe that India was 17 for 5. And then the way Kirmani and Kapil Dev, I mean, that redoubtable inning, 175 innings, that changed it all, all. And that day, I just want to add one thing. BBC was on strike.
True.
So there was no recording being made. Maybe some person had a amateur recording and all, which we couldn't see. So that greatest knock probably in the World Cup was lost to mankind, so to say.
One quick word, when you look at history and when you look at World Cup, that particular World Cup in, from 75 to 83, did that loss in 83, was that downfall or was that, was that from where West Indies started dipping? Because in 87, they did come to the World Cup and they did put up a good show, but was 83, the tip of the iceberg that West Indies began to
well, we'll have to just go back a bit because 83 World Cup, because that squad, they had all seasoned names, and then what followed was this transition phase. That phase of transition, we saw that, okay, this team, there was a lot of, all these oldies had to leave.
Okay.
So once these oldies decided to go, whether it was, all these big names, because before that, there was a score which we always spoke about, there was Roberts and there was, Holding and all these big names. But, suddenly we saw a lot of oldies leave this stage because they wanted to leave on a high that India didn't let them happen. So thereafter we saw that change. Maybe the replacement were not so great, but then also at the same time, look at India. India grew in self-belief. There was, like Australia started believing that yes, we had played once, we had reached Lords for the big game and they couldn't make it work. But then what happened was thereafter we saw a team which was under transition. It was under serious transition. That was Australia for you. That changed, and then somehow West Indies wasn't the same on these wickets in India, because West Indies, in my view, was strongest when it played in England.
True.
If you see its history, the way they mauled England series after series in England, that is what made West Indies what it was. All its big scores, all its historic runs have come in England against England.
Well, now let's move ahead. Let's look at what happened after that. We've reached 1983, India's first World Cup triumph. After that particular triumph, it changed cricket in India, and the World Cup moved out of England. The World Cup from 60 overs became 50, and in 1987, India were the hosts. It was the first time that the World Cup moved out of England to India, while 1992 saw the World Cup move down under with the emergence of colour clothing. That's not all. World Cup cricket was played with white cricket ball. 2003 saw India reach the World Cup final once again. But what happened in that World Cup in South Africa? Let's take a look.
World Cup 1987, host Pakistan and India, champions Australia, runners-up England. There were quite a few firsts in this World Cup. One, it was held outside England for the first time after 3 consecutive World Cups. 2, neutral umpires were used. 3, the overs were reduced to 50 per innings to balance the fewer hours of daylight in the subcontinent. Australian skipper Alan Border chose to bat on a seemingly flat wicket at the Eden Gardens. David Boone led the Aussie batting charge with 125 ball 75 to take the total past the 250 mark. In reply, England were on par with the required run rate when Bill Athey combined well with captain Mike Gatting to put on 69 runs in 13 overs. However, Gatting played a needless reverse sweep and handed the initiative back to Australia. Alan Lamb tried his best with a 55 ball 45, but the climbing run rate got the better of him. With 70 needed of the last over, Greg McDermott held his nerve and bowled Australia to a 9-run victory. This game was a tale of 2 different captains, one Alan Border, who inspired his side when they were down, while the other Mike Gatting, who handed the initiative back by playing a reckless shot. World Cup 1992, host New Zealand and Australia, champions Pakistan, runners-up England. This was the first time that the teams sported coloured clothing and played with the white cricket balls at the World Cup. The International Cricket Council introduced a complete round-robin format for the first time in World Cups, doing away with the use of 2 different groups. Inspired by a superb burst from pacer Wasim Akram, Pakistan were the new world champions after beating England by 22 runs in the final at Melbourne. The left-arm pacer cleaned up Alan Lamb and Chris Lewis off consecutive deliveries to leave England in tatters. Victory was sweet, particularly for Imran Khan and Javed Miandad, who had been the sole survivors since the first World Cup, held in 1975. The duo had played their part earlier in the day, adding 139 runs for the 3rd wicket. World Cup 1996, host India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka, champions Sri Lanka, runners-up Australia. World Cup returned to the subcontinent for the 2nd time. When India and Pakistan were hosting the tournament for the 2nd time, it was the first time for Sri Lanka. Arvinda De Silva was the hero on the big night, following up his 3/42 and 2 catches with a sterling 107 as Sri Lanka became the first host nation to clinch the World Cup. After being invited to bat first, the Sri Lankan spinners restricted Australia to 241. Sri Lanka endured a shaky start, losing their in-form openers early, but Arvinda De Silva and Arjuna Ranatunga steered them to the finish line with ice coolness. World Cup 1999. Host England, Wales, Ireland, Scotland and Netherlands. Champions Australia, runners-up Pakistan. Cup returned to the United Kingdom for the 4th time. The 7th edition of the multi-nation event was hosted mainly by England, with Scotland, Ireland, Wales and Netherlands playing co-hosts. Steve Waugh dropped, makes South Africa pay. Australia breaks South Africa's hearts. In one of the most poignant moments of history, Alan Donald was run out with the scores tied, leaving Australia joyous on entering the final and the dreaded C word coming back to haunt South Africa. In a seesaw battle, Lance Klusener, the eventual man of the tournament, panicked at the final instant to leave his partner Alan Donald stranded. Earlier, Sean Pollock had finished with 5 for 36 to restrict Australia to 213. One of the most lopsided World Cup finals ever, Shane Warne led Australia's demolition of Pakistan, grabbing 4 by 33 before Steve Waugh's men wrapped up the title in a chase that lasted a mere 20.1 overs. World Cup 2003 hosts South Africa, Zimbabwe and Kenya, champions Australia, runners-up India. World Cup entered African territory for the first time, with South Africa, Zimbabwe and Kenya co-hosting the event. This was the first time 14 teams, the most back then, participated in a World Cup. Ponting blows India away as Australia defend title. There was a big roar from the crowd when Sourav Ganguly called the right side of the coin. However, they were unaware of what was to come. To everyone's surprise, because there was a bit of dampness on the pitch, Ganguly opted to field. India's opening bowler, Zaheer Khan, couldn't handle the pressure of a final and he bowled a 10-ball over which yielded Australia 15 runs. From that point, the Aussies never looked back. Adam Gilchrist attacked from the word go and Australia were 100-0 in no time. Although India hit back with 2 quick wickets, skipper Ricky Ponting and Damian Martin shared an unbeaten 234-run stand for the 3rd wicket, which meant Australia posted a massive 359 for 2. Ponting in particular was severe on the bowling, hitting 4 fours and 8 massive sixes. It was also the highest individual score then in a World Cup final. India's dreams were shattered when Glenn McGrath dismissed Sachin Tendulkar in the very first over. Although Virender Sehwag with 82 and Rahul Dravid with 47 showed some resistance, the Aussie bowlers picked wickets at regular intervals and eventually they bowled India out for 234 in the 40th over to burst into celebrations.
Rakesh, 87 and 96 twice that India hosted the World Cup. Both the times we could never see an Indian team or a Pakistan team reach the final. At least in 96 we had Sri Lanka win it. How do you look at these two World Cups that India hosted?
See, 87 World Cup, if we see, I mean, I think in the history we had probably the strongest World Cup squad. And till then, there was this very strange history which said that the strongest team in the world after 87 never won the World Cup. I mean, the strongest team in 75 was, of course, like West Indies, and after that again it was the same team. But thereafter, if you see, there was a sequence that the favourites never won until 1999. Coming to 87, 87 was 1 year where, there was again, that was also the way that Indians showed that, look, other countries other than England could actually do a great job as hosts, and that was the first World Cup. Till then it was never called World Cup. It was known by the name of the sponsors.
True.
Because the sponsors insisted. There was an insurance company which sponsored the first 3 editions, and they insisted that it not be called the World Cup, it should be called by their name. So then came the 1987 edition in India, where Indians showed that what commerce could do with World Cup. There was so much to it. I mean, no other World Cup was so like lavish in the first 4 editions. The 4th one was, and then again we showed it again in 1996 when we co-hosted with England and with Sri Lanka and with Pakistan. Now that was again big moolah. That was what every country got, the kind of assured amount which no other country ever offered, no other host ever offered. So world cricket grew. So that was India's contribution. That is where I hold somebody like Jagmohan Dalmia, the man behind BCCI in 1987, who actually thought big, and then he made the world cricket bow to India's wishes or whatever. That is the reason why we are where we are today. That was the beginning of India's domination as administration of world cricket.
Okay, when you look at 1999 World Cup and the 2003 World Cup, both World Cup which featured an Asian team there. But when you purely see in terms of Australian dominance, do you feel those two World Cups were not perfectly matched in that final, the way the finals played out? One was a low scoring one, the other a high scoring one.
You mean to say when Australia
won?
Yeah. See, what Australia did in 1999 was a massacre in, at Lords. What they did to, Pakistan, I still remember Shane Warne's spell, and also when they chased down some 132 or something. They actually reached that 130 mark in no time. I mean, that was the shortest World Cup final ever, with Adam Gilchrist going hammer and tongs against the finest of the attacks which we saw in 1999 from Pakistan. Whatever they had to offer, Adam Gilchrist just destroyed it. And then if we jump to the 2003, the big game again, 359 on the board for the loss of just 2 wickets. That is where I think Indians just let it slip. Indians didn't know where to bowl. And it all started with Gilchrist and Hayden, and then of course Ricky Ponting came and hammered that 140, I remember, which was one of the possibly, if you just look at the way he smashed the Indian attack. I think Indians had lost the match before they could even face the first ball. And then the early loss of Sachin, that turned it around. However, Australia was already the dominant side by then. If you look at it, the way they won the 1987, nobody gave them a chance, because that was the time when Australia under Alan Border was just showing that they were a team in transition. But by the time we reached 1999, they were a top side, and Ricky Ponting was showing the way. And the way he did those, those two, World Cup triumphs, it was back to the dominance of, say, a team like, West Indies. We knew that was the strongest team, and they showed that the strongest team could still win the World Cup.
Well, we spoke about, World Cups till 2003 when India reached the final. But what happened after that? India, from playing that 2003 final, did a U-turn or a complete 360 turn in fortune to plummet to their worst performance 4 years later in 2007. We picked the pieces to win the 2011 crown in Mumbai City. The 2015 World Cup was yet again a good show, but one bad night and the Aussies returned to the World Cup for the 5th time after an 8-year wait.
World Cup 2007 host Windies, champions Australia, runners-up Sri Lanka. Australia made a hat-trick of wins. In what turned out to be a rain-marred final, Adam Gilchrist's brutal assault on Sri Lankan bowlers took the wind out of the opposition's sails, and Australia won the World Cup for the 3rd successive time. In spite of playing countless blizzards all over the globe, Gilchrist had struggled for touch in 2007 World Cup, but in the final, runs flowed like a gigantic river from his willow. Despite Sanath Jayasuriya's sustained carnage, Australia eventually won the game by 53 runs via Duckworth-Lewis method. The members of the Australian squad celebrated the occasion with unfettered joy. World Cup 2011 hosts Bangladesh, India and Sri Lanka, champions India, runners-up Sri Lanka. The 10th edition of the World Cup returned to the subcontinent after a span of 15 years. India, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh played hosts. Ireland come back from the death to stun England. England captain Andrew Strauss opted to bat on a batting paradise in Bangalore. Kevin Peterson, Jonathan Trott and Ian Bell justified his decision as the trio scored 50s and propelled their side to 327. Nobody expected Ireland to chase this down, especially when they were 111 for 5. In walked Kevin O'Brien, who had other ideas, and along with Alex Cusack added 162 runs for the 6th wicket. When he was done, O'Brien had scored a stroke-filled 113 and left Ireland 13 short of the target. John Mooney finished the formalities in the final over and Ireland created history. They had chased down the highest score in a World Cup game. Dhoni's masterclass. It was not only MS Dhoni's unbeaten 91, but also the decision to promote himself ahead of the in-form Yuvraj Singh that won India the World Cup. Sri Lanka had entered another World Cup final and they did not want to lose once again. Mahela Jayawardene made sure that the first half belonged to them as he scored a marvellous 103 to set up a target of 275. India needed a special innings to overcome Jayawardene's knock and they got 2 from Gautam Gambhir and Dhoni. The former laid the foundation for the latter to finish and the skipper sealed the victory with a humongous 6. India won the World Cup after 28 years. World Cup 2015. The 11th edition of the quadrennial tournament was co-hosted by Australia and New Zealand. This was the second time that the World Cup was staged in Trans-Tasman territory since 1992. Australia win 5th title. Despite losing the toss and having to bowl first, Australia got off to a rousing start as Michelle Stark knocked over Brendan McCullum for a duck in the very first over. New Zealand could never recover from the blow and were eventually bowled out for 183. In reply, Brendan McCullum set attacking fields. Smith, who recorded his 5th 50 in a row, hit the winning runs to give Australia the World Cup for the 5th time. Sports Desk, DD News.
Well, 2011, India under MS Dhoni, that 28-year wait for that World Cup glory was over on that Wankhede night when MS Dhoni walked out there. Change in batting order, but he changed fortunes there. Rakesh, when you look at that particular World Cup 2011, you know, comparisons not allowed in cricket, I would say, but 2011 World Cup team to the 1983 World Cup team, what was unique and what was, you know, peculiar about the two sides?
Well, this was a team which knew how to win, because this almost the same squad had won the 2007 T20. So, you know, just after that, and of course they had the advantage of playing at home, and that was again the side which was probably, I'll give it to MS, the way he led the team. He made the people believe. I mean, it is like, imagine a Gautam Gambhir right up there trying to show his way, and you know, that was probably the World Cup that a lot of people do not care to remember his contribution. Yuvraj's contribution against Australia, fantastic again. In terms of, you know, like bowling also, we had some superlative shows there, but everything in India. So Indians started as the favourites, being the hosts. And it wasn't very often that we have seen and you know, any host country winning. India was probably the first country to host the World Cup and show the world that a host could win. So, you know, you just have to give it to the team as a whole.
Okay, when you look at Sri Lanka and South Africa, I would put two teams together. Why? Because they both come as surprise package. South Africa always promise so much on the table, but never deliver. Sri Lanka never looks promising enough, but always come to the final. How do you look at these two teams?
Yeah, I mean these two sides they study. I mean they actually present a study in sheer contrast. Sri Lankans are never taken as pre-tournament favorites, never.
Okay.
And South Africans always tell you, look, we have the individual skills. We have the skill sets to go all the way, but together as a side, they somehow don't click.
Okay.
And Sri Lankans quietly sneak in to the big games, come out stronger, and of course if you just remember, both 2007 and 2011, they were second best to teams that eventually went on to win.
True.
But give it to them. But South Africa, they've been tagged as chokers, but I don't think that is fair on them because they try their bit, they try their best. Somehow they are not able to put everything together on that given day.
Okay, not able to put everything together on that particular day. But coming to the present World Cup in 2019 in England, Australia, India, England, the three sides that could possibly be there in the semi-final. I would ask you to pick your fourth team there because that's a difficult choice because I put it across to my team. Nobody was ready to pick that fourth team in the semi-finals. Who do you think is the likely chance of, or an outside chance of making it to that semi-final?
See, I've always felt that New Zealand as a side, this crop, they are pretty solid. They're pretty good. They are the ones who can make it as a fourth team.
Okay.
South Africans, they are pretty good, but then for once, if they can all shake that past away, because they are somehow chased by what has happened in the earlier editions.
Will an AB de Villiers would have made difference to that South Africa?
Absolutely. He is one guy on his day, he could just turn things around, but unfortunately he's not around. But then overall, I think South Africans cannot be ruled out. I mean, their options and the kind of stuff which they have to use all their options, but New Zealand will be my fourth team.
Okay, New Zealand your fourth team, but any dark horse that you would put in this particular World Cup semi-final?
Out of these four? Out of these four, I mean, for me, the favorite is England, without a doubt. Australia, a close number 2. India, third. New Zealand, fourth. That's my order. So, if there has to be a dark horse, it has to be either India. Of course, India, I'm saying it because I don't expect Indians to go all the way, to be very honest. But if they are not among the top 2 teams as the third team, that's my best bet.
Okay, you putting New Zealand as your fourth team there, but I would go ahead and put an Asian team there as the fourth team there in the middle for the World Cup. Thank you and appreciate it joining us this evening. A pleasure having you here. Well, that's all we have time for in this edition. It's a treat getting that World Cup history for you. We're going to be back again on Friday evening with a big 1-hour show. We're going to have our phone lines open and we're going to look at the 2019 World Cup, the chances of India and also the prominent players that could make a difference in this particular World Cup. That's all we have time for. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. Take care.